Yo, what is up, people of the internet? My name is Renegade Operative, and today I will be talking to you about some Star Wars Battlefront 2 first impressions. Not to be confused with Star Wars Battlefront 2 on the PS2 by Pandemic Studios. Today we're talking about the PS4 beta that just came out for a new line of Star Wars with Star Wars Battlefront 2. I played this beta for like 6 to 7 hours, and I wanted to be able to shed some light and give some first impressions on what I think about it, and also offer up some insight on what this game changes in terms of its predecessor. Let's begin. First, I wanted to talk about the graphics. The graphics are phenomenal, beautifully rendered, great. It looks really good at 60 FPS. You can tell they put a lot of work into making this game perform the best they possibly could, and it really shows. Particle effects are like in the wind here, beautifully rendered explosions, laser blasts. It feels so authentic to the experience that you really aren't taken out of it by something muddy and dull looking and colorless. They really put a lot of effort into making this the best they possibly could at 60 FPS, which I can thoroughly appreciate. This game is beautiful. Beautiful performance all around. Next up, we have an addition, and I think this addition is really good. It wasn't in the original, and that's the fact that you can take a knee like a bad quarterback, because now there's a crouch button. You can crouch in this game. You can duck from cover. You can roll around. That type of mobility is not present in the original Battlefront that I played a couple of years ago. However, yeah, I still see the appeal of the going prone button still surprisingly absent in Star Wars Battlefront. It's not a big deal, just a minor nitpick, because you can crouch, you can roll, you have all these mobility options, but you cannot go prone, which is quite disappointing. You can see it in Battlefield 1, but you can't do it in Star Wars Battlefront. Moving on, I will talk about more of the positives here. I will talk about the immaculate netcode. You are basically thrusted into a game that has surprisingly good internet connection, which is rare because I get into betas with amazing trash bag lag, especially the fact that Star Wars Battlefront 2 with Galactica Assault, it handles 40 players on the map divided up into 2 separate teams. That is a lot of stress. That's a lot to manage. And somehow they managed to do this in an immaculate effort. They managed to make the netcode surprisingly good. I didn't have any server drops. The server didn't crash. Everything felt surprisingly well. I managed to get my friends in player matches, although they need to fix the invite system, because I remember I had to get in a PSN lobby with my friends in order to play Battlefront 2 online. So again, despite the immaculate netcode, I do think they have to fix the player lobby thing online, make it more accessible for quick matches so you don't need a PSN party to get the ball rolling with your friends. They can join whenever, and that will be good enough through the invite system. Even when you think outside the box into the overall grand scheme of things, you will notice that the tip of the iceberg just doesn't stop there with Galactica Assault. You go into stuff like the space battles, which they have these giant dogfights of fighting like maybe 4 or 5 battleships at the same time, and you're doing these crazy objectives, and there's these crazy like ships all over the map that you can go into the interiors, the holes, and everything just doesn't stop flowing from there at a consistent frame rate with barely any lag drops at all. Now, I'm not saying that lag spikes don't tend to occasionally happen on Star Wars Battlefront 2, because I did see some players maybe glitch out here or there, maybe drop here or there. Something weird happens where you're shooting someone and they appear for a slight second to another side of the screen, but that was only like rare. It was only one instance where I saw like I shot some guy and he apparently like teleported like fucking Goku straight out of Dragon Ball Z and shit with the instant transmission. That's the only time I saw one rare instance in a Galactica Assault where that happened. Someone teleported to the other side of the screen, but other than that, it wasn't really noticeable. I really didn't have any problem problems with the overall netcode of Star Wars Battlefront 2, and you see betas get fucked up all the time, so this was really refreshing. One final thing I will say about the Battlefront 2 beta is if you're a huge Star Wars nut, you will notice that this game still has the presentation. It looks very authentic to the Star Wars mythos in terms of characters, weapons, and the stuff you see and hear. The score by John Williams is still there, it's still composed. You hear the blasters in the distance, you hear all the stuff going on with the characters, you see the Imperials versus the Rebels, you see Darth Maul from episode 1, you see Rey from Force Awakens, you hear the whooshing of the lightsaber sounds. Everything just feels incredibly replicated in this game, just like it was in the first one. I think I gave the first one a positive for this measure of having that quality. They really put the effort to make this game feel like a Star Wars multiplayer game worth playing in that regard to presentation, and I hope the campaign really reflects on this too. The game feels alive, the game feels genuine, and that's what I will want as a Star Wars fan, and I think that DICE did a good job there. Alright, so bear with me, we're going to get into the negatives, and a lot of negatives in Star Wars Battlefront 2 stem from the gameplay, because I had problems with enemies taking extreme damage, taking forever to kill, and it just started to become very tedious after a certain point. I remember the enemies were dumb. Some players are dumb and they just stand there and they take the hit, but I throw grenades at someone, it doesn't kill them. When people get the Jedi boost, that's when they transfer over into the Jedi characters. That's when they get more health, and I was like, okay, I'm headshotting Darth Maul and nothing's happening. Oops, he runs up to me, kills me with a lightsaber, even though I'm like fucking 8 yards away. Okay, you know, so that's one instance, right? Then when people get the drone robots, they have even more health, and then they have more one-shot guns. What I mean by this is everyone seems to get the assault class that has rocket launchers. Then you have the guys that have the jetpack guys. Like, the jetpack guys are like Super Simeon Sam in fucking space, and I got like a 5 kill streak just having the blaster gun and the rocket launcher with the jetpack, just sneaking up on people. It feels like there's classes that are so unbalanced in Star Wars Battlefront that at a certain point it just becomes quite the aggravating piece of despair to deal with. There's also these points and cars that you have to get that gets you like certain weapons and attachments, and you have to be at certain levels. So even though EA proposed that Star Wars Battlefront 2 is going to be quote unquote full of free DLC, there's still these grindy incentives that they abuse, that you have to wait to unlock certain characters with points or cards. It reminds me of the rec cards from Halo 5, where you get certain bonuses if you invest into these cards, and I think the same following suit is going to happen to Star Wars Battlefront 2. These cards are going to incentivize you to get certain weapon attachments in order to use a certain loadout or ability, and I think that is quite bullshit, to be honest. I wish all this stuff that is supposed to be in the game with all these points and stuff was actually accessible to people in certain game modes. Now, granted, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, they do have heroes versus villains, so if you want to play as an initial hero or an initial villain, then it is in the launch title of the game. But I do wish that the power-ups for the characters that you could buy was available easier with pickups. I like the pickup system. I had no problem with picking up ships or characters if someone got to them. It's okay, whatever. I wish it was more evenly dispersed, but still, waiting to buy a certain character like a Force character, a Force user, a Jedi, a Sith, I just don't want to wait in a screen to get a character and then I die, and then it's like, well, my opportunity is for naught. I still do think that Star Wars Battlefront is a decently good game. Battlefront 2 is still decent in the fun factor. I did have some fun with it, but I didn't feel this game was $60 fun. It felt like some bargain bin $20 release that was only slightly better than the original Battlefront, and that's really not saying much. Like I said, I think Galactica Assault wasn't really as fun as Walker Assault. I enjoyed being on Hoth, fighting the AT-ATs. I enjoyed that a lot more than fighting the MTTs with the ion blasters, and it felt a little bit tedious because there are side objectives dispersed all over the map, and it just felt a little bit inconsistent. So I'm going to talk about the space battles. Now, space battles, they are an entry into Star Wars Battlefront 2, and it was in the older Battlefront games. Because, you know, wink wink, the older Star Wars Battlefront, well, the one that came out before this one, it had a lack of content compared to the pandemic releases. Now they put in space battles. Space battles were fine once you get used to it, but it did feel a little bit slow and sluggish when it came to doing a 180 and turning around. I wish there was a quick turn option for the ships. That's just my little nitpick. But overall, once I got used to it, I started killing people. I started racking up kills. I started doing objectives. It's really fun when you get down to how that game mode works in particular. So I didn't mind space battles after a certain period of time, but my first match I had a bad experience with it because, like I said, I wish there was quick turn and I wish there was more options to the overall game mode, such as, you know, deathmatch, space battles, a more clear objective. So to sum up the modes they had available, there was Strike, there was arcade mode, which I didn't get the chance to touch. Strike was essentially 8v8, so it is less hectic on a certain scale. You're still doing objectives like maybe protecting a ship. Then you have Galactica Assault, which is 40 characters on a map going ham, going at it, and you have to protect a certain vessel like the MTT. And then you have space battles, which is essentially what they are. You're in space, you might be dogfighting people doing certain objectives. I didn't play arcade mode like I said before, so I have no opinion on it really, but I assume it's just arcade co-op with a certain particular challenge mode in there where you have to fight all these characters in the Imperial Army. So I enjoyed that from the original Star Wars Battlefront. It does seem like it has significantly more content going for this game when it comes to Battlefront 2. However, it didn't really appease me to the point of having that price of admission. Like I said, this sounds like a $20 game at best, not 60 bucks. The stuff they're doing with the loot boxes I think is really annoying, and if I'm being honest, I think that the current loot box system is a way for EA to incentivize the player into buying these new cards so they can have more weapons at their disposal and maybe get more characters early to play with on the battlefield when you're selecting a certain character, because like I said, there's multiple characters from the Rocket class to the Jedi to the Sith. There's so many that you have to grind out and get, and I think that's going to be the meta of the game. I think Battlefront 2 is a little bit better than its predecessor, but it's not saying much. I think it's fun, but at the end of the day, you have to shape your own perspective on Star Wars Battlefront 2. Like I said, there's a decent fun factor. There's something there for people who like first-person shooters, for people who might like Star Wars shooters, but at the same time, am I really going to justify stuff like microtransactions, getting points for characters, grinding out, waiting on the screen to unlock someone, getting killed, some bad hit ratio that happens in this game when it comes to shooting at people, because I have seen it. And then you have to think about the stuff that they put in the game. Some things catering to the fans like the campaign and the space battles, but overall there's not enough to warrant what they put in this game. There's not enough content from what I see. People say that the older Battlefront is significantly better. Maybe they should have taken some cues from the original Battlefront 2 and added stuff from there to make everything more varied, because like I said, they don't have the really specific traditional modes other than playing the objective, which is quite unfortunate. I do love the performance. EA really did a good job here. DICE did a really excellent job of working on the performance, but everything else, it just gives me a mixed feeling, and that is exactly what I think of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Until then, this is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed my first impressions of Star Wars Battlefront 2. I enjoyed talking about it. Hopefully I see you guys later. Remember to like and sub. Take care, and I will see you guys next time. Later.